All right, in part one of this lecture on language change, we talked about linguistics as a discipline and the different levels of organization of language that make up the study of language as a system. In this second video, we're going to just talk a bit more about that, and we're going to talk about language as convention, some of the more assumptions made by linguistics about language being not just systematic, but conventional and arbitrary, and we'll talk about what we mean by that. First of all, just to pick up on the distinction that I made, I added another slide. I thought it would be useful. Between the two major approaches to linguistics, synchronic and diachronic. If you study phonology or syntax or morphology, you might just study the standard American English and never think about its change over time, but just study the complexity and rules of that system, which can be remarkably complex. Anybody who's taken a course on Introduction to Linguistics knows what I'm talking about. But synchronic linguistics is that approach that just isolates the present, usually the present incarnation of a language. It's concerned with events existing in a limited time period and ignoring historical antecedents. Synchronic linguistics is the scientific study of a language as it exists at a theoretical single moment in time, such as syntax or phonology. Now, I say theoretical single moment of time because language is always changing. Pronunciation is changing, words are changing. So synchronic linguistics studies the language system as an abstraction in a way. And this is the approach that was innovated by Ferdinand de Saussure in the 1910s in his course on general linguistics that revolutionized the study of linguistics and made synchronic linguistics the more prominent version. Prior to that, most linguistic study was the study of language change. It was diachronic, of relating to or dealing with phenomenon as of language or culture as they occur or change over a period of time. So diachronic linguistics is the scientific study of language change over time. And historical linguistics belongs to this. I mean, diachronic linguistics can also just study sociolinguistics can belong to this too. If you study changes in code switching in a bilingual community over the course of 2 decades, that's not generally considered historical linguistics, but sociolinguistics. Historical linguistics takes a much longer view. But diachronic linguistics and historical linguistics grew out of philology. And philology grew out of the study of the classics in the Bible and the desire to find the most authoritative and accurate and early texts. And so this took a greater understanding of language. And so we'll talk more about this next week when we talk about the discovery of Proto-Indo-European, the distant ancestor of English and many other European and Asian languages. But suffice to say that we are doing diachronic linguistics here, but in a way that is informed by many of the discoveries made by a synchronic approach over the 20th century. So the next thing that we need to talk about is the fact that all natural languages are conventional and arbitrary. This is one of those founding assumptions and discoveries of synchronic linguistics that I was talking about. Now, what does that mean? All natural languages are conventional and arbitrary. What it means is that the connection, the link between the sign and the signifier is not determined by any natural connection, but by social convention, by custom, and that it is arbitrary. It is unmotivated, so to speak. There is no connection between the word cat and this adorable little fuzzy thing. Now, we can see that in Dutch, that is also called a kat. In Russian, it's called a kot. In Spanish, it's called a gat. In Portuguese, it's a gato. And we can see there's a similarity between all of these. And what we're going to learn is that that's because English, Dutch, Russian, Spanish are all descended from a common source language. They are sister languages. They have a common ancestor, and so they have inherited a similar word with certain similar features, similar sounds. And this is why the study of phonology is important. Once we learn a bit about phonology, we can say, wow, all these have velar stops at the beginning and an alveolar voiceless stop in the middle. So you can say very precise, fancy things like that when you study linguistics. But there's no necessarily connection between that combination of sounds and this adorable little thingy. Because in Nepali, spoken in Nepal, it's a Biralo, and I don't know how to pronounce these languages, so please forgive me if you know them and I'm slaughtering. In Hawaiian, it's a Popoki. That actually kind of works for me. Korean, Goyangi. Tamil, it's Punai. In Chinese, it's Mao. In Malay, it's Kutsing. I don't know, Ikati and Ngosa. And Azerbaijani, it's called a Pishik. Now, there's no necessary connection between any of these combinations of sounds and that little animal there. It is conventional. It just so happens that Ikati in Ngosa, maybe it accidentally happens to sound like cat, but that's a historical accident. There's nothing about that sound that is connected to the thing that we refer to in any way. This is a fundamental assumption of linguistics. This is a fundamental assumption of modern philosophy. Plato actually argued the opposite. He in his dialogue, The Cratylus, Plato argues, or Socrates argues, that there is a necessary connection between the name of a thing and the thing that it names, that it expresses some truth or innate nature about it. And he gave the example of the ursos in Greek, which means bear. And he says, well, it sounds like growling, ursos, except that, there's a lot of languages that are different and sound nothing like that, and they still somehow manage to mean bear. You might say that there's a little bit of an exception to this, that some words do represent more directly the thing that they are describing. And this isn't the case in, for example, onomatopoeia, right? So the word splash sounds like a rock or a person going into water. And so we can talk about onomatopoeia, but even with onomatopoeia, it is sort of framed by the phonological system of that sound. So we have meow in English and mau in Dutch, and meow in Russian, and meow in Spanish, and meow in Nepali. But then in Korean we have yaong, miav, meow, Chinese, miav wamak. Okay, that's awesome. Anyway, even with onomatopoeia, there is going to be a connection, but it's still not absolute. And I would invite you to look up all the different languages onomatopoeia sounds for the sound that a rooster makes, because those are awesome. Cock-a-doodle-doo. Check out the one for Finnish in particular, the little scavenger hunt for you here. So, okay, just to recap, all languages are systematic, all languages are conventional, and all languages are arbitrary, and we can study those systems and their meanings in terms of how they exist as a single system at a moment in time, in synchronic linguistics, and we can, as we are going to do in this class, study how those are going to change across time, and that's diachronic linguistics, and if you take in a really broad view, it's historical linguistics. And next, we're going to talk about, more specifically, how languages change and the kind of change that we're going to look at. Keep on following in the next video.